The snare had teeth of silver, and the wolf caught in it was the largest Mira had ever seen, black as spilled ink, one foreleg swallowed to the joint by wire that hissed faintly where it touched his fur. She smelled the burn before she saw it. Scorched hair and hot metal, sharp over the wet moss smell of the ravine. The wolf watched her come down the slope with eyes the color of lamplight through honey, and he did not growl, which any sensible woman would have found strange. Mira was not always sensible. She set down her bee smoker, knelt in the mud, and said, "Well, you've made a mess of yourself, haven't you?" The wolf, for his part, was thinking that he was Kyle Ravenmore, Alpha King of the Northern Range, and that he had ruled 40 packs for 11 years, and that he had just been caught in a poacher's snare on his own land like a yearling rabbit. He was also thinking that the Omega crouched in front of him smelled of lavender and wood smoke, and that the scent was doing something to the back of his skull that he did not have a word for. "Leave," he told himself. "Chew through your own leg if you must. Kings do not get rescued." Then she pulled off her shawl, wrapped it around the silver wire so it wouldn't sear her palms, and worked the snare open with a bone-setter's patience, murmuring the whole time the way she probably murmured to sick hounds. There, big fellow, nearly. Don't you bite me now, I've only got the 2 hands." The wire parted. The wolf's leg came free, bleeding, the flesh beneath scorched in a neat spiral. And Kale, King of the Northern Range, terror of the border wars, did not run. He limped after her all the way back to her cottage like an enormous black shadow with poor decision-making, and he told himself it was because the wound needed tending. He meant to stay one night. He was wrong. Her cottage sat at the ragged edge of the royal forest, where the pines gave way to heather, a low stone thing, with a roof that needed re-thatching, and 7 beehives lined along the south wall like sleeping soldiers. Inside it smelled of beeswax and pine tar, and drying yarrow hung in bundles from the rafters. Mira was a bone-setter for beasts. Hounds with cracked ribs, hawks with sprung wings, once a plough horse with an abscess the size of a fist. The lords of the region sent her their broken animals and paid her in flour and firewood and, when they remembered, coin. It was not a living so much as a slow argument with poverty, but it was hers, and no one in 5 years had come to take it away, which was more than she could say for anything she'd had before. She cleaned the wolf's leg with honey and boiled water while he lay across her hearthstone, taking up the entire hearthstone, and she talked to him because she talked to all her patients. "Silver wire," she said. "That's poacher's work, and cruel work too. Silver's for killing our kind, not deer." She paused, glanced at his eyes. "Though I suppose you're not our kind, are you? Just a wolf. A great, stupid, beautiful wolf who stepped in the one snare in 40 miles. I am your king," Kale thought, "and I will have that poacher's hands." The wolf thumped his tail once against the floor. When she reached across him for the honey pot, her sleeve slipped, and Kyle saw it. High on her left shoulder, a brand, the rejection mark, a crescent scored through with a straight line, the mark a pack burned into an Omega when an Alpha claimed her and then cast her off before witnesses, the mark that shamed her out of any territory that saw it. It was old, years old, and it had never healed. The edges were still raw, weeping faintly, angry red against her skin. Rejection marks never healed. That was the point of them. They ached every day of an Omega's life, so she would never forget what she was worth. Something in Cale's chest turned over slowly, like a great stone shifting in a riverbed. She caught him looking, or thought she did, the way one thinks a dog is looking, and tugged her sleeve down. "Never you mind that," she said lightly. "That one's past fixing. Yours isn't. Hold still." She'd cut her palm on the silver wire, despite the shawl, a thin line across the heel of her hand. When she finished binding his leg, the wolf leaned over, very deliberately, and licked the cut. "Oh, don't," she laughed, pulling back. "That's not—" He did it again. Slow. Careful. And Kael told himself, with the full authority of a king addressing his council, that wolf saliva contained healing enzymes, that this was a well-documented medicinal fact, that he was merely repaying a debt in the only currency available to a wolf, and that the way her laughter loosened something behind his ribs was entirely incidental. Medicine, he thought firmly. It is medicine. That night, she slept on her narrow cot, and the wolf slept on the floor beside it. And in the smallest hour, when her breathing had gone deep and slow, he rose. He stood over her a long moment. The rejection mark showed at the collar of her night shift, raw and weeping, 5 years unhealed. He licked it. Once gently, the way a wolf cleans a packmate's wound. She sighed in her sleep and turned her face toward him. And Kael Ravenmore stood frozen in the dark of a beekeeper's cottage, with his heart hammering like a boy's. Medicine, he told himself. Nothing more. I was gone before dawn. He came back the next night, and the next, and the one after that. And this is where the trouble truly began, because a king cannot vanish every night without his beta noticing, and Orin noticed everything. "You have mud on your boots," Orin said on the 4th morning, in the tone of a man laying out evidence. "Again. Sire, I walk the grounds, it clears my head. The grounds are gravel, some serpents are gravel. I walk them vigorously." Orin set down the morning dispatches, reached into his coat, and produced, with the gravity of a man drawing a murder weapon, a knitted shawl. Grey wool, mended at one corner with mismatched thread, smelling unmistakably of lavender. The steward found this in the throne room, under the throne, sire. Kael looked at the shawl. He had carried it off in his teeth 2 nights ago because the scent helped him think, which was a perfectly sound strategic reason, and he had apparently, at some point, curled up with it under his own throne, like a hound with a stolen boot. "Evidence planted by my enemies," said the king of the northern range. "Your enemies knit, do they?" "My enemies are resourceful." The wolf's visits took on a pattern, and the pattern escalated, as such things do. First was the licking, every night, her palm, and then always when she slept, the mark on her shoulder. And Kael's excuses to himself grew increasingly baroque. Enzymes, circulation, a wolf's duty to a packmate. The fact that the mark had begun, impossibly, to heal, its raw edges going pink and quiet for the first time in 5 years, was surely proof that the treatment was working and must therefore continue. Then it was gifts. He brought her a deer one night, an entire deer, laid across her doorstep like a tribute, and listened from the tree line while she stood in her night shift saying, "What am I meant to do with all this, you enormous lunatic? I haven't a smokehouse." The next week he did better. He raided the palace kitchens in the grey hour before dawn, and carried a cloth bundle of honey cakes 11 miles in his teeth. And it was only after she'd unwrapped them, delighted, that he saw what he'd forgotten. Each cake was stamped with the royal seal. "These are the king's cakes," Mira said slowly, turning one over. The wolf assumed an expression of profound innocence, which on a wolf the size of a pony was not convincing. "These are stamped. Did you steal these from the palace? Did you rob the Alpha King?" The wolf yawned. "You're going to get us both hanged," she said, and ate one, and then, after a pause, a second one, and the wolf's tail swept the floor like a broom. Then came the bath. He arrived one evening having rolled, for reasons that seemed excellent at the time, and involved a scent he wished to investigate, through a bog. Mira took one look at him, pointed at the big copper tub she used for scalding wax, and said, "In, now. I'm not having bog in my house." And Kael Raven Moore, who had not been bathed by another living soul since he was 4 years old, who had killed the rogue Alpha Skane in single combat before 300 witnesses, climbed into a beekeeper's wax tub and sat there, while an Omega in rolled-up sleeves poured warm water over his head and scrubbed lavender soap into his ruff and scolded him throughout. "Great filthy creature. Look at the state of you. You'd think no one owned you at all." She worked her fingers behind his left ear, where an old arrow had left a notch, and scratched, and the king's back leg began to thump against the copper entirely without royal authorization. She laughed so hard she had to sit down on the stool. "Oh, you're just a big dog, all that size, and you're a dog." "I have executed men for less," Kyle thought, eyes half shut, leaning his soaked head into her hands. The next morning he sat through a full session of the War Council, smelling of lavender soap. Councillor Vane's nostrils flexed. Orin stared fixedly at the ceiling with the expression of a man being paid nowhere near enough. "New soap, sire?" Vane inquired. "Assassination deterrent," said the king. "The scent confuses trackers." "How prudent, sire." The bed was the last frontier, and the wolf took it the way he took everything, by increments and without shame. First just his head on the edge of the cot, then his forequarters. Then one night Myra woke with 190 pounds of wolf stretched against her back, radiating heat like a hearthstone, and she was warm for the first time since autumn came, truly warm, and she made the fatal error of not kicking him off. After that, it was simply how they slept, her spine against his ribs, his breath stirring her hair. And every night, once she was under, that gentle tending of the mark on her shoulder that she never once woke for. The near disaster came in the 3rd week. She was half asleep, drowsy and murmuring, and she reached back and scratched the notch behind his left ear, and Kael was so entirely undone by it that his control slipped. For a heartbeat, no more. The paw under her hand shivered and lengthened, fur retreating, and became fingers. Mira's eyes flew open. By the time she'd rolled over, there was only a wolf, a rigid, wide-eyed wolf, feigning sleep so badly that his ears were standing straight up. "Huh," she said, staring at him a long moment in the banked firelight. "I could have sworn." She looked at her own hand. "I need to sleep more." The wolf did not breathe for a full minute. By day, of course, she knew the king, in the way a field mouse knows a mountain. The royal kennels had summoned her twice that autumn, a hound with a torn stifle and another with a fishhook in its lip. And both times, the Alpha King himself had appeared in the kennel yard, unannounced, arms crossed, cold as January. Ostensibly to inspect his hounds. Everyone at court agreed the king was terrifying. He said perhaps 9 words per visit. What Myra noticed, because she noticed animals, and the king was more animal than anyone at court understood, was that his 9 words were always questions about her methods, and that he stood downwind of her always, and that once when she'd sucked a hound's fishhook wound and spat blood into the straw, this glacial, beautiful, frightening man had gone faintly pink at the ears and left the yard at a pace just short of fleeing. "The king's an odd one," she told the wolf that night, working a comb through his ruff. "Everyone says he's made of ice, but he watches like he's starving. You'd know the look. You have it every time I open the honey." Watching her, from a handspan away, through the eyes she didn't recognize, Kael thought, "This cannot continue." He thought it the way he thought every night. It had the worn smoothness of a river stone, that thought, from being handled and put down again so many times. It was the ledger of small things that undid him, in the end. Not her face, though her face did him no good either. It was that she saved the last honey cake for the wolf every time. It was that she talked to her bees each morning, actually talked to them, told them the news like relatives. It was that she'd been thrown away by her whole world, branded for it, and had somehow arrived at kindness instead of at bitterness, and no one had ever explained to Kael that such a thing was possible, and he found he could not stop studying it. The turn came on a night of hard rain, when she couldn't sleep, and lay with her fingers buried in his ruff, and told him the thing she had never told anyone. "His name was Rowan," she said to the dark, to the wolf, to the rain on the thatch. "Alpha's son of Thornmere Pack. I was 17. He claimed me at the autumn fires in front of everyone, and I thought, so this is my life beginning." Her fingers stilled. His father wanted a border alliance instead. So at the spring fires, Rowan stood me up in front of the same everyone and spoke the rejection, and they held me down for the brand while he watched. And I remember, this is the strange part, I remember he was crying. He cried and he let them do it anyway. I think that taught me more about the world than the brand did. The wolf lay very still. Under Kael's skin, in the deep place where the wolf's instincts lived, something ancient was rising with its hackles up, cataloguing a name. Rowan. Thornmere. It's supposed to hurt forever. A rejection mark, she went on, softer now, wondering. That's what it's for. But it stopped. Weeks ago. It's closing and that's not possible. And I looked in every book I have. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. There's an old midwife's tale that only one thing heals a rejection brand. A true mate's touch, fated. But that's a story for children. And anyway, no one touches it. No one's touched it in 5 years. The rain filled the silence. The wolf, whose tongue had touched that mark every night for a month, stared into the banked coals with the expression of a man watching his own trial. "So it's a mystery," Mira said, and yawned and pulled his ear gently. "You're the only one I'd tell, you know. You can't repeat it. That's the whole of your charm. Tell her," said something in Kael that was neither fully man nor fully wolf. "Tell her now, tonight, while it is still a gift and not a wound." "Tomorrow," said the king. "He was a brave man in every arena, but this one." Then Lord Dane arrived, and tomorrow ran out. Dane came from the Eastern Range to negotiate grain tariffs, a broad, sun-weathered alpha lord with an easy laugh and a hunting falcon on his wrist. And the falcon had a wing strain, and someone in the kennel yard said the name of the bone setter at the forest's edge. That was all it took. He rode out to the cottage himself, watched Mira splint the wing with her quick, sure hands, while bees drifted around her head like a slow crown. And being a straightforward man, he came directly to the point. "I've a court, but no beast healer worth the title," he said. "Come east, your own house, a proper surgery, a wage in silver. And I'll be honest with you, since you seem the sort who'd smell a lie." He smiled. He had a good smile. "I'd not object to knowing you better besides." He saw the brand at her collar when she moved. And here was the thing about Dain, the thing that made him dangerous in a way no villain could have been. He didn't recoil, and he didn't pretend not to see it. He just said, "Thornmere's loss," mildly, as though her greatest shame were a bookkeeping error by fools, and went back to admiring his falcon's splint. Mira did not say yes, but she did not say no, and she stood at her fence watching him ride off, and she was still standing there, thinking, when a page arrived to summon her to the palace. A whelping gone wrong in the royal kennels. Urgent. It was not urgent. The whelping was long over, mother and pups thriving, and the Alpha King was in the kennel yard when she arrived, and he was not cold. That was the first wrong note. He was pacing. "Lord Dane visited you, not a question. News travels fast, sire. He made you an offer." "He did." She studied him, this mountain of a man wearing his composure like a coat one size too small. "A good one, a house, a surgery, silver. You will refuse it." The words were out before Kael could stop them, in a voice he barely recognized, and he watched her spine straighten and knew he had blundered. Somewhere behind his sternum, the wolf was pacing too, snarling east, east. He touched near the mark, he smiled at her, and the man was losing the argument for the first time in his life. "Will I?" Mira said quietly. "Begging your pardon, sire, but I'm not pack of yours. I'm not pack of anyone's, as the whole world had a fine time telling me once. I'll go where I'm valued." "You are valued." His hand had closed on the kennel rail. The oak creaked. "By whom?" "By me howled everything in him. Every night for a season. Your shawl is under my throne. Your voice is the only thing that quiets me." The gold flooded his eyes, wolf gold, blazing, and he heard the rail crack in his grip like a green branch, and he saw her step back. From him. Fear sent, faint but there, cutting through the lavender. That more than anything brought him back. Kael let go of the splintered rail. He looked at his own hand as though it belonged to a stranger. "Forgive me," he said, low. "You are free, of course. You have always been free. That is the whole trouble." And he walked away and left her standing baffled among the hound pens. And that night, for the first time in a season, the wolf did not come, nor the second night. On the third day, the rogues came instead. There were 4 of them, hired blades with silver knives, and they came at dusk with Sua, firing her hives first, because burning bees will drive any keeper out of any cottage. Mira came out with a wax knife and fury, and no chance at all. What she learned afterward was that Councillor Vane had grown tired of watching his king ride nightly toward a beekeeper's cottage, tired of his niece, Seraphine, groomed from birth to be Luna, sitting unmarked at the king's left hand, while the king smelled of lavender. What she learned was that the silver snare in the ravine, all those months ago, had been Vane's as well. Set for a wolf, he'd heard, ran alone in the royal forest at night, though he had never dreamed which wolf. What she knew in the moment was only this. Smoke, and her bees dying, and a man with a silver knife closing the distance, and then the dusk tore open, and something enormous and black came over her fence without touching it. The wolf hit the first man like a landslide. The second's knife found his shoulder, silver, biting deep, and the wolf made a sound she'd never heard, and did not slow. But the third man had a crossbow, and he had it leveled at Mira, at her chest, at 10 feet, and no wolf's body could stop a quarrel that close. So the wolf did the only thing left. Between one stride and the next, in the full sight of her, he stood up. Fur poured off him, like water off a surfacing swimmer. The quarrel meant for her heart took the Alpha King of the northern range through the left shoulder, above the silver wound, and he stayed on his feet, and he broke the crossbow and the arm holding it, and when the last of them had fled or fallen, he turned in the smoke of her burning hives, bleeding from 2 wounds, wearing the face she had bathed in lamplight without ever knowing it, and said, "Mira." She stood absolutely still. Around her feet, dazed bees crawled in the ash. "You," she said. "Yes, the snare, the ravine, that was me. The honey cakes, the royal cakes, that I was frightened would get us hanged. You stole your own—" "They were technically mine," said the king, swaying slightly. "So, not stolen. Strictly. I bathed you." Her voice was climbing. "I scrubbed you. I told you about the king's ears going pink. I told you about—" And then her hand went to her shoulder, to the mark that had healed, and Kael watched the last piece drop into place behind her eyes, and it was worse than the silver. "Every night," she whispered. "It was you. The medicine. You swore. No, you couldn't swear. You were a wolf. You just every night while I slept. And you knew what it meant. The mate's touch. You knew what the healing meant. And you let me sit there, wondering, telling my secrets to your king's own face. I was going to tell you. When?" The word cracked across the yard. "You had a season of nights. You had every chance a liar ever got. I told that wolf things I've never said aloud. I told him about Rowan, about the brand, about—" I told him because he couldn't repeat it. That was the whole of his charm. And the whole time you're the king. You sat on your throne with my shawl under it. How do you know about the shawl? I didn't until now. The Alpha King of the Northern Range stood in a burning bee yard with an arrow in his shoulder and shut his mouth. She patched him. That was the unbearable thing. She was who she was. So she sat him on her own stool and cut the quarrel free and packed both wounds with honey from her murdered hives, with hands that never once stopped being gentle and a jaw set like a trap. And when it was done, she said, "Now get out. Miram, you let me be a fool for a season because you liked me better asleep and unknowing. Whatever this is," her hand pressed flat over the healed mark, over the bond thrumming under it, that she could no longer pretend away. "I didn't consent to it with my eyes open. So you'll give me what nobody's ever given me. You'll go, and you'll stay gone until I say otherwise. And if you're truly a king, and not just a big dog in a crown, you'll do it without arguing." He looked at her for a long moment. Then the Alpha King bowed his head, the way no one at court had ever seen him bow it, and went. He did not send guards to watch her, though it cost him. He did not send letters. He sent, via Orin, exactly one thing: a wagon load of new hive boxes, unstamped, unsigned, and Mira stood looking at them for a long time before she let them through the gate. It was Seraphine who came, in the end. Vane's niece arrived alone on the 9th day, dismounting in the yard in her court silks among the ash and the rebuilt hives, and Mira braced for cruelty and got something stranger. "My uncle is in chains," Seraphine said, without preamble. The snare-maker talked. "So you'll have justice if that's a comfort. I find it isn't much, but people differ. She looked at the hives, and something moved behind her practiced face. I was 6 when they started training me to be Luna. Deportment before breakfast. My mother used to pinch the inside of my arm at table when I laughed too loudly, where the bruise wouldn't show. 20 years of that, and he never once looked at me the way he looked at his own boots when your name was mentioned this morning. She pulled her gloves straight. I came to hate you, I think. But you keep bees, and your yard is burnt, and he's stopped eating, and I find I'm only tired. At the gate she paused. The council votes at the full moon to settle the question of a Luna. Come or don't. But you should know he told them, all of them, that he'd take no one, ever if not you. He said it the way he declares wars. It was, she considered, quite embarrassing, honestly, for everyone. She rode off. Mira stood among her hives until dark, and the bees settled, and she thought about a wolf who had licked a wound every single night for a season, and called it medicine. Because the truth that he was a king, and she was a branded outcast, and the moon had tied them together anyway, was too large to say with a tongue that couldn't speak. At the full moon, the great hall of the northern range held 400 wolves, and the council had gathered to put the question formally, and the doors opened, and a beekeeper walked in, smelling of lavender and smoke. The hall went silent by sections, like fields going dark under a moving cloud. She walked the whole length of it in her mended shawl, past silks and steel, past the alphas of 40 packs, and the whispers ran ahead of her. An omega. The brand, look at her collar, the brand, and Kael came down from the dais, so fast that 2 guards started forward and thought better of it. He stopped an arm's length away. Close up, she could see he'd lost weight, and that the notch in his left ear had its echo in a thin scar at his hairline, and that his hands were not quite steady. You said to stay gone until you said otherwise, he said quietly, just for her. I'm saying otherwise, on conditions. Name them. No more locked doors between the wolf and the man. If I'm having one of you, I'm having both, honestly, in daylight. Her chin came up. And my hives stay. I'm not giving up my bees for a crown. The crown can learn to live with bees. The crown, said Kael, will keep bees on the palace roof if you ask it, and you'll say it out loud. Here, what I am to you. Because I was claimed once in front of everyone by a boy who took it back, and I swore no one would ever do that to me twice. So if you mean it, you'll mean it where 400 wolves can hold you to it. The Alpha King turned to the hall. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Hear me. This is Mira of no pack, and the mark on her shoulder is healed, and every wolf in this room knows what that means and what heals it. And I will answer any alpha who pretends not to. His hand found hers. She is mine. I am hers. It was decided by something older than this council the night she pulled a silver snare off a fool in a ravine, and the fool has merely taken a season to catch up. He paused. Also the matter of the missing shawl from the Eastern laundry last winter. That was me, as was the venison and the cakes. We know, sire, said Orin from the 3rd row into the silence. Everyone knows. The bond bite, when it came, they did privately, as such things should be done. But the roar that went up in the hall when the king bowed his head over the healed brand and pressed his lips to it. 400 wolves giving voice at once. They say the sound carried to the forest's edge and set the bees humming in the dark. The epilogue is small, as the best ones are. A summer evening, a year on. The palace roof, absurdly, holds 9 hives now, and the Luna of the northern range sits among them in the long gold light with her back against a chimney, shelling peas into a copper bowl, and stretched beside her, with his great black head in her lap, is a wolf the size of a pony, boneless with contentment, one ear notched, tail sweeping the slates in slow strokes. A.B. lands on his nose. He goes cross-eyed. He endures. Mira sets down the bowl, tugs her collar aside out of old habit, and touches the mark on her shoulder. Silver now. Painless. Just a shape like a crescent moon that somebody long ago tried to cross out and failed. The wolf lifts his head and gravely, thoroughly, licks it once, the way he has every night for 2 years, and looks up at her with lamplight honey eyes that are not hiding anything anymore. "Medicine?" she asks him. The thump of his tail against the roof slates sounds for all the world like a heartbeat.